Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale and I'm privileged to join Minister Hardeep Puri, who's got three heavyweight portfolios to look after during the COVID-19 crisis and even otherwise. He is the Minister of State, independent charge of Civil Aviation, Urban Development, Housing, and of course, he's the Minister of State in the Commerce Department. Welcome, Minister Puri. Thank you for your time. I know how busy you are. But let me start with the obvious question. The Civil Aviation Ministry has drawn up a very elaborate plan to repatriate the stranded Indians across the globe. Give us some details on how you've gone about it and what are the plans that you have now put in action from maybe in a couple of days.
Nitin, first of all, let me thank you for having me on your program. Civil aviation for a country like India is, as you know, a critical driver of economic growth. But some of the figures, I think, tell a story in themselves. We have on an average an annual footfall of 435 million people. We have the world's third largest civil aviation market, the third largest domestic market, and we are going to be the third largest overall civil aviation market. Civil aviation had been growing very rapidly in spite of some challenges that we faced last year. Now, when the lockdown was ordered, clearly at that point of time, the notice given to people who were in different parts of the world was not particularly long. We ordered the shutdown, making allowances for certain factors. The Prime Minister was able to take bold decision, an early and timely decision, which perhaps explains the fact that we are in a reasonably comfortable position insofar as overall fatalities are concerned, and the number of positive cases is in relative terms somewhat limited. We have a very harsh lockdown. So at that point of time, clearly there were Indians who are distressed and stranded in other countries. There are other people who need to come back because either they have been deported or stand ready to be deported. Their visas have expired. There are other people who had gone on business for short durations, and when the lockdown came, they were stranded. So the number of people who are outside and need to be brought back, equally Indians who are on long-term work visas or who have regular jobs, who are normally resident abroad, are here. So there was a very genuine need for them. They've been clamoring that we need to bring these people back. Now, let me give you an idea about the numbers.
Sure.
Initially, when this exercise started, Nitin, the Ministry of External Affairs was working on a hypothetical basis, hypothesis of 190,000 people who need to be brought back. But clearly, once we got started, when the embassies and high commissions started contacting Indians who were stranded there, the numbers which were coming forward were much higher than the 190,000.
True, far higher. Yeah.
Now, many of them perhaps don't need to come back. And when they find out that the evacuation plan involves a charge to be paid and that you would, after returning, have to go into 14 days of quarantine, it is entirely possible that some people may have second thoughts. On the other hand, there are people who genuinely need to come back because of professional reasons or because they are in distress and are stranded, need to come back. For them, that's no consideration. We have worked out a program. The first week, that is the May 7 to 13, we will be carrying 64 flights. Will come from 10 different places, countries, to bring back approximately 15,000. But this number will have to be, increased quite substantially. Now, any success for a comprehensive evacuation plan like this, and I have 40 years of experience in another word. Let me tell you, this is by far the most comprehensive evacuation plan and the most complicated evacuation plan. Because you're not just bringing people back to the country. The states which are receiving them, the flights will come directly to, let's say, Kerala, for given an example. Then they will have to be screened. Then they will have to be put into quarantine. So it's just not the number of flights and the number of people coming back. There have to be arrangements in those places to receive our citizens when they come back.
Right.
We are the civil aviation component, the one being conducted by Air India or Air India Express, is only one part of that. There will be other, means of transportation by the Navy in particular, etc. So I just took the opportunity a few minutes ago of having a press conference to outline the main features of this repatriation or evacuation, highlighting that this essentially involves those who are stranded and in distress, not people who would normally want to come back, and reiterating all the while that domestic and international civil aviation operations continue to remain suspended.
That is important because a lot of people want to know that.
Yeah. The lockdown has been continued till 17th May. As soon as that lockdown continuation decision was announced, the Director General of Civil Aviation was obliged to issue a notification saying that civil aviation operations, both domestic and international, will continue to remain suspended. Now, this evacuation plan is being done within that framework of domestic and international flights not going on. So it requires even more safeguards to be put in place. Prescribed health protocols, measures to screen and quarantine our citizens when they come from abroad or visitors who come from abroad, and also at the same time making sure that this does not open or undermine the civil aviation ban which exists till 17th May.
That's right. So let me look at the days or months and weeks after the lockdown is lifted. Clearly, the civil aviation sector in India, as you said, went through some challenges last year, and then the lockdown, of course, happened. But do you have a plan, or do you have ideas to revive the sector? Because they all seem to be in some kind of a distress. They must be petitioning you. They must be talking to you. What is your sense of the days after the lockdown?
Nitin, we are in touch with all the stakeholders in this sector, principally the airlines, the air carriers. We are, my senior management, the secretary and me and others, they are constantly in touch with the airlines, with Air India, with Indigo, SpiceJet, Go Air, with all of them. We are in touch with the tour operators, the travel agents. We are in touch with the airport operators, not only directly, but also through the Airports Authority of India. Now, when you make arrangements for, let's say, whether it's 190,000 or 250,000, this is just the first week's program that I have outlined.
Exactly.
I mean, as we learn from the experience, and depending on how it proceeds, the numbers will be increased and adjusted, and more states will begin. Today, I was asked a question, why is a particular place not included? I said, well, they may be included in the second week's operation.
Yeah.
Look, civil aviation, both domestic and international, will ultimately have to be resumed. We are in the fortunate position, I think, that we have a large country which already has a well-developed civil aviation network. So, irrespective of what happens in the global environment, irrespective of what happens in the international travel segment, there will be robust demand for domestic travel. Equally, if you accept the figure, which is a working hypothesis we often use, that we have 25 million members of the Indian community outside. They may be Indian passport holders. They may be holding travel documents or passports of other countries, but they're essentially Indian origin. They will want to come back. So if you look at the traffic between India and the United States, India and Canada, India and
even UK,
the United Kingdom, the Gulf. I mean, just to give you an example, I don't know what shape the world is going to take, But just now, presently, we had, prior to the lockdown, 1,000 flights a week between the Gulf and India. 1,000 a week means more than 100 flights a day. That gives you an idea about the kind of interaction.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
I have no doubt that India's civil aviation requirement and the potential that there is, we will come out of the crisis stronger and more able to take on the world. But that requires, in the first instance, we must survive it. We have to ensure that the ecosystem that we have, our airlines, our passengers, etc., they must be able to weather this current phase. And therefore, when we start opening the domestic sector, clearly we cannot do it in one go. Because, you cannot have a situation where parts of the country are listed in the red zone. You can't fly there. Clearly,
No.
You can only allow traffic to fly between cities which are in a position to take them.
Right.
Now, we are therefore making these arrangements, and my expectation is that when the time comes to resume domestic civil aviation operation, we'll have to do it in a calibrated and a graded manner. Hypothetically, maybe 25% first, then another 10%, and so on and so forth.
And also while flying and while doing the checking in and the luggage collection and all that, lots of new protocols will have to be put in place, which I'm sure Airports Authority, Civil Aviation Ministry, everybody is working about. So I guess that is something that is being worked out, and I'm sure people will have a different experience flying within the country, because if social distancing norms have to be observed, all those protocols have to be followed, I guess.
Well, let me just put it this way. This is work in progress. Ideally, you should devise a system where no queuing takes place at the entry point at the airport. And I would recommend, and this is what we are toying with, that if you have to travel, you can print out your boarding pass at home. You can even print out your baggage tag, and preferably travel light so that there's no baggage queuing, etc. Because you are trying to maximize the safeguards within the framework of economic viability. I mean, it'll be very viable if the entire aircraft has only 20% of the passengers traveling, but it's no longer viable.
Exactly.
So I'm afraid we will have to deal with a situation where you use masks and other prescribed protocol without making the air travel less economically viable than it already is. I mean, these airlines are all under stress, not only in India, all over the world, because given the cost of aviation fuel, given the intense capital intensive nature of the business, there are challenges. So I'm sure that both from the security agencies, the airport operators, the airline, they will work out protocols which are viable and acceptable to the health authorities.
Right. So one final question on the civil aviation part. I'm sure the airlines industry, which includes, of course, airports authorities or airport operators, airlines operators, all of these people might be looking for, like other sectors, some kind of a package, revival package, or a boost to their financial condition. So even that will have to be taken into consideration by you and the Civil Aviation Ministry, I guess. I'm sure you know about it.
I mean, you would be surprised. I mean, there's no sector which is not looking for some form of support. Whether you call it a bailout package or you call it some other form of assistance, this goes without saying. What happens is that you need to look at the totality of the situation. There are certain things you can do more easily than others. And you have to also look at how the allocation of resources is prioritized given the claims of different segments. Now, in the case of airline, many of them have borrowed money and there are contractual relationship between the lessor and the lessee. That's something where the banks, they might have to approach to give them bridging loans, etc. Employers, I mean, I have heard employers need to pay salaries, and maybe some of them have asked for concessional loans at 2% to pay the salaries for the next 2-3 months. I'm not talking about civil aviation sector alone. I'm talking about employers in general. So this is something that is looked at. Sectoral reviews take place, and those are many of these decisions I think, will be taken and are being considered at the highest levels of the government.
I'm sure. So let me move away from civil aviation and look at your other responsibilities, housing, urban development, and with the migrant labor having gone back in large numbers or still going back on the trains, once the sector opens up, when the lockdown opens up, do you see some kind of an activity, some kind of a plan coming from your own ministry in housing and urban development where it will help revive the economy, or it will help boost the economy by helping the construction work or infrastructure work in the urban areas and housing sector particularly? Is there a plan there?
Well, there has been a plan all along. That's why, first of all, it's a very difficult choice between life and livelihood.
Absolutely.
Jahan and Jahan. I mean, clearly, when you are faced with an invisible enemy, when you're not able to predict the behavior of the virus, you want to take enough precautions. But if you take total precautions and have a very harsh lockdown, in some respects, our lockdown was pretty severe,
Yes.
it cannot but undermine economic activity. So we had to open up. Agriculture was opened up right in the beginning. Apart from agriculture, construction activity, especially highways, etc., was opened up. Now, other construction activity where labor is in close proximity to the place of work, that's opened up. Also, we have a situation where goods are being allowed to be transported, both essential and non-essential. Trucks are being allowed to move. But meanwhile, your focus on migrant labor is absolutely correct. You know, they are also human beings. If they are, many employers have risen to the occasion and have continued to pay their salaries. Civil society, NGOs, langar societies, all of them have been providing food. But at the end of the day, the psychology of living in a camp, in a transit camp, and the desire to go back to your own village. That's why the government realized that, at the end of the day, you have to respect the wishes of the migrant labor, and
Right.
special trains have transported them back to their states. Now, as economic activity revives, there is an incentive for those people to come back.
Yeah.
Equally, you could argue that
Yes.
when they are not there, it would be very difficult for some industries to revive because they are dependent on the
Exactly.
workforce. I mean,
Yes.
this may not be the case in sectors like information technology, etc., because somebody can work from home. But the
Right.
skill sets required for the workforce, if the migration takes place of migrant worker, you will have to encourage them to come back. And I think everybody is acutely conscious of that. In the
Correct.
first round, there was a demand that we want to go back to our homes. They had to be fed. They were kept in camps. Their special trains are being run. But very soon when they go back, when migrant labor is in cities, they also remit money to their villages. So
Absolutely.
very soon, and when you have a segment of normalcy, at that stage, I think there will be a momentum, there will be a desire for people to come back.
Come
Now,
back.
this has to be calibrated.
Right.
Clearly, if it's done sequentially, you have a problem.
Exactly. So I think life as we knew is going to change in every sector, every segment. But I can't let you go before I ask you a question about your profession for 40 long years and diplomacy. How do you see the world changing post COVID-19 crisis, sort of getting a little resolved, or we have overcome that hump that we will overcome in the next couple of months or so?
Well, I mean, experience has taught us. I mean, if you look at the history of mankind, very often you reach these decisive moments. I mean, the Spanish flu in 1918,
18.
1900 years ago, it claimed millions of lives, okay,
Right.
all
Right.
over. There is a point of view that as soon as there is a vaccine available and there are cures available, this may just be a reference point, something that you will occasionally talk about. My own view
2020.
is slightly different.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the international community, and certainly in India, we are waking up to the realization that, chemical weapons, biological issues,
Yeah.
these are things to be very careful about. The need need to invest more by way of a percentage of the GDP in healthcare, to look at issues of climate change, to look at wildlife, to see what is the interrelationship between man and animal, between nature. I think there is going to be a definite change for the better on that.
Right.
Will the new post-COVID existence, if I may call it that? First of all, one doesn't know when it's going to come. The most optimistic scenarios tell you that a vaccine is still a few months away. Some
Right.
people say that by the time the clinical trials take place, it's going to be nearly a year. But
Yeah.
in all this, one wants to be more optimistic than normal. We will need to refashion and redesign our existence. One of the
Right.
lessons we are already learning is that you and I can have a good conversation without being physically present in a room. And I have today done a press conference on VC. I've done several.
Sure.
Much of our decision making today within the departments of the government is equally efficient. We are able to do this on WhatsApp, on other medium. So we are positively learning from all that. But let me tell you, we will not be able to define the new normal unless we have an exact understanding of where we are. Today, it's very easy to follow a debate which is on, what caused it? Could it have been done differently? Was
Right.
there full disclosure?
Correct.
Could we have, in the early stages of the spread of the pandemic, done things differently? Well, I think whatever happens, the Indian response by the Prime Minister, we were one of the first to cut off air travel to a particular country. We started screening people. I was calling this a pandemic a good 15 days before the WHO woke up to the realization. And I must say that no matter whom you talk to in India, and for that matter, anywhere in the world, I have friends calling me from New York. I said, how did you guys get it right? How did the Prime Minister get it right? I mean, if you look at the death rate in New York,
Yeah.
sometimes it's 2,000 in a day. And
Exactly.
our total, I mean, look, one death is one death too many.
True.
But the
True.
fact is, if you have 42,000 cases and your doubling rate is only 10 to 15 days, 13 days, etc., you're not looking at a figure which should really cause alarm bells to ring.
Exactly.
But you have to be careful if when a second
Wave.
wave comes, it's going to come everywhere. I mean, there are countries which opened up very fast and then they had to go into a much longer and a more severe lockdown, including small countries like Singapore and
Singapore.
including large countries like China. They
Yeah.
declared themselves free and then, first it was Wuhan, then Haipin, another province went into lockdown.
True.
I think we'll have to be very careful and the jury's out on what the new normal will look like. But I think this presents all manner of opportunities for us. Nitin, we did not make a single PPE in India prior to
Right.
this. Today, you're making 250,000 a day. A day.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
could be not only PPE supplier to India, to South Asia, but the whole world. I
Right.
mean, look at the manner in which you have leveraged your pharmaceutical industry. I mean, many years ago when I was ambassador in Geneva, we had, India became the pharmacy of the world in terms of supplying generics, etc., to Africa, Latin America. But today, you are supplying hydroxychloroquine to the United States, paracetamol to Europe, to your neighboring country. So I think a crisis presents both a challenge, but also an opportunity. And I think the Prime Minister's personal monitoring, his personal scrutiny of all these sectors and the discussion that we are in, I think a stronger India will emerge from this, both in terms of how we are positioned in the world, but more than that, in terms of a sense of self-reliance and a sense of confidence to meet the challenges not only from COVID, but the post-COVID world and the other challenges which will come.
That's very well put, Minister Puri. In fact, I thank you for that great insight into what India should look forward to, because other things, of course, are crisis management, but to have that foresight of what we are looking at is something that we will cherish from this interview. Thanks very much for your time, and always a pleasure to have the conversation with you.
Thank you very much, Nitin. I was looking forward to this, and I'm glad we were able to do it today.
Thank you very much. And to our viewers, please do not forget to like us on our social media handles, and of course, keep sending us the feedback. You cannot get a better conversation with any other minister but Minister Puri, and I think we've had a wonderful insight into how the government is working in various sectors. Thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Nitin.